Trump arms the Navy. Lasers, nuclear missiles, gold. A new signal to allies and enemies alike. America will dictate again. Washington is split. Witkoff and Rubio, each is pulling the Ukrainian deal in his own direction. Who is actually negotiating with the Kremlin? Zelensky signs but says nothing. The United States asks for silence. Guarantees, the army, money, coalitions, everything happens behind closed doors. Oil prices have collapsed. A barrel costs $34. This is the level of the 1980s. This is how the collapse of the Soviet Union's economy began. The Financial Times writes, Putin is being lied to. Generals are bringing fake reports. The president lives in isolation and believes he is winning. The Greenland scandal. Trump appoints a special envoy. Denmark summons the United States ambassador. Europe sees a threat to territorial integrity. Mindich, a friend of Zelensky, is hiding in Israel, under investigation in Ukraine on an international wanted list, yet calmly sunbathing in Tel Aviv. The United States blocks Venezuelan tankers. Caracas speaks of piracy. The White House speaks of fighting drug trafficking. In reality, it is about oil. Immigration raids are coordinated directly from the White House. A former head of ICE says agents are being demanded numbers, quotas, threats, arrests. Donald Trump stated that negotiations between Ukraine and Russia are underway. The wording is strange. He himself is not participating. The White House is divided, and public statements increasingly contain direct contradictions. At a meeting with journalists, Trump said that the conversation is ongoing and that the talks are going quite well, but behind this formula there is neither a date, nor a format, nor any agreements. He mentioned that the sides allegedly suffered 27,000 losses in a month, without details, without sources. The phrase sounded like a planted talking point, without emotion, as if he were talking about corn purchases. He mentioned Cambodia, Thailand. He said that he has experience. He said that he had already stopped 8 wars. He said that Marco, apparently Rubio, had prepared everything well. But in the same speech, he admitted that between Zelensky and Putin, there is enormous hatred. This is the key phrase, because none of the participants in the negotiations say this officially, and if that is the case, then everything being built is hanging by a thread. Next to Trump, there are 2 centers of influence. The first is the State Department. The second is the president's inner circle. And between them, conflict. In recent weeks, Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, and Marco Rubio, the current Secretary of State, have found themselves on opposite sides. Rubio favors a hard line without compromises. Witkoff favors agreements, even if they provoke criticism. He flies to Europe without coordination, uses private security, holds meetings behind closed doors, and this causes open irritation. Part of Ukraine's negotiating team acknowledged that Witkoff's proposals had been rewritten. At the insistence of the State Department, provisions limiting Western military presence disappeared from the document. They were replaced with more aggressive wording. As a result, 2 camps within the American administration are sending 2 different signals. One favors pressure on Russia, the other favors an accelerated signing. Formally, they act under one name. In reality, they are playing against each other. And while this is happening, Volodymyr Zelensky speaks about guarantees, but he speaks as if someone is standing nearby with a switch. He constantly refers to the fact that it cannot yet be discussed publicly, that the United States of America asked not to disclose details, that the documents are still being coordinated. He says there are 2 levels, multilateral guarantees and a bilateral agreement with Washington, and that one of these documents already matches what Ukraine wanted by 90%. But the most important thing is not said out loud. Zelensky says that the draft includes an army of 800,000, and that maintaining it requires commitments from partners. Otherwise, it is just paper. He says that Ukraine's reconstruction will be fixed in a separate agreement, and that it has already been drafted. But he adds, there are things there that we are not ready for, and there are things that the Russians are definitely not ready for. He states directly that the Americans are now continuing talks with Moscow, and that Ukraine is waiting for feedback. What does this mean? It means that the key phase of negotiations is taking place without Kyiv, and the main struggle is not for land, it is for control over future obligations. Vladimir Putin is convinced that Russia can win the war. He repeats this publicly, calmly, confidently, but in the offices around him there is uncertainty and fear. The Financial Times writes that distorted information is being delivered to the president. Generals Officials and security services report based on a polished picture. They exaggerate Ukrainian losses, downplay their own, and by any means show progress. As a result, Putin lives in a filtered reality in which the war is unfolding in his favor. Sources in the Kremlin say that the president receives only the figures he wants to see. Everything else does not make it into reports or daily briefings. And this information isolation is not an accident, but part of an internal system designed to protect him from the truth. In reality, the front has frozen. The economy is sagging. The West is not leaving. Ukraine is receiving weapons, but Putin continues to make decisions based not on facts, but on reports in which Russia is advancing. And in parallel, the collapse of oil prices. A barrel of Urals crude has fallen to $34. This is lower than at the beginning of the war. This is a minimum that even inside Russia is called a catastrophe. In the Baltic, oil is trading at 34.82. In the Black Sea, at 33.17. This is not just a decline, this is panic. For comparison, in 1986, the price fell to similar levels. A year later, an economic collapse began that led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Now the scenario is similar, but with one difference. Back then, the country was closed. Now it is under sanctions. Russian companies are forced to offer discounts of tens of percent just to find buyers at all. Revenues are falling. The treasury is losing billions. And this is the foundation of the budget. These are pensions, salaries, subsidies, the war. And the lower the price, the harsher the cuts will have to be everywhere else. Against this background, another figure is being mentioned. $1 billion in daily losses for the Russian economy solely because of discounts. And that means that every day without buyers costs the Kremlin more than a month of combat operations. Oil is no longer a weapon. Now it is a burden. Donald Trump appointed a special envoy for Greenland. It became John Landry, the governor of Louisiana, a politician without diplomatic experience but with the full support of the president. Officially, for national security issues. Unofficially, to strengthen control over the Arctic. Landry immediately stated, Greenland must be under United States control. In Washington, this was presented as a strategic necessity. Allegedly, Russian and Chinese ships operate along Greenland's coast, and therefore a trusted representative is needed. Trump said directly, "We need this. This is our issue, not for minerals, for security." But in Copenhagen, this statement caused an immediate reaction. In Denmark, it was stated that such a step is a direct violation of diplomatic etiquette. Because Greenland is an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark, the European Commission supported this position. Territorial integrity is not a subject for discussion. The Danish authorities summoned the American ambassador. The foreign minister stated, "Building relations is possible. Annexation is not." And Landry himself is not a diplomat. His rhetoric is perceived as provocation, not negotiation. All of this is happening against the backdrop of increased United States interest in the region. This is not only about geopolitics. There are resources, routes, radar positions, missiles, and surveillance systems. And none of this is coordinated with Europe, and it will not be coordinated. Now about something else. Timur Mindich is a friend of Volodymyr Zelensky, one of the key figures surrounding anti-corruption investigations in Ukraine. And according to the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, a person connected to major shadow flows in the energy sector. He is officially under investigation. He has been declared wanted. And then, a journalist from Ukrainska Pravda, Mikhailo Tkach, spots him in Tel Aviv, on the beach, without security, without panic, in plain sight. Mindich is a citizen of Israel. This gives him protection from extradition, and he uses it. He appears rarely. He does not contact the press. But the point is different. No one is looking for him. He calmly left before searches came to his door. This is not just an escape. It is a demonstration. The circle around the Ukrainian authorities has a backup plan. And in that plan, there is no fear. There are connections, there are documents, and there is shelter. For Zelensky, this is a blow to his image. For the system, it is a failure. Because if a person from the president's closest inner circle ends up on the run, the question is not about him. The question is about those who provided him cover for so many years. Meanwhile, Venezuela. The United States blocks 2 oil tankers. On board, about 4 million barrels of oil. Caracas calls it piracy. Washington says it is a fight against drug trafficking. The situation escalated after the United States announced full maritime control over tankers traveling to and from Venezuela. According to satellite data, one of the tankers has been stopped off the coast of Texas. Formally, because of the sanctions list. In reality, because of the oil. Venezuela accuses the United States of violating international law. It says this undermines the energy stability of the entire region. It threatens to take the case to international courts. The White House responds, the tankers are linked to Maduro. The money from their sale goes to weapons, drugs, and influence. The head of the Department of Homeland Security speaks directly. This is the enemy. We will apply pressure until he leaves. And adds, they are killing the next generation of Americans with drugs. We are obliged to stop the flow. The rhetoric is blunt, without diplomacy. The mission is military. The arguments are security. In reality, energy. Raids by immigration police in the United States have become widespread. Detentions of undocumented migrants take place daily. People are pulled out of homes, shops, buses, following orders from above. Former head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement Darius Reeves explained how this system works. According to him, orders come directly from the White House, not from the agency, not from the courts, from the offices of political advisors. He claims that managers received calls with threats. They were told, "I need numbers." Arrest plans were passed down to field offices. At that point, no one cared who the person was. The main thing was status, violation, quantity. They were working for statistics. Stephen Miller, a Trump advisor, personally called local offices. He pressured them, demanded reports, reminded them of quotas. Those who failed were threatened with dismissal. The motivation was one, to show that migration policy works. Numbers mattered more than court cases. This became a system. Arrests were carried out in uniform, with weapons, on the streets, people in armor as during sweep operations. Migrants were detained even for administrative violations, an expired visa, an incorrect address, lack of insurance. The law was not important. The scheme was. Reeves says, "We are not catching criminals, we are catching ordinary workers because it is easier, because it is faster, and because we need to report." He was fired. He speaks openly, and no one disputes it. These raids became part of Trump's rhetoric. He repeats that he is protecting America, but behind the scenes, repression. People disappear from their homes. Children are left without parents. There are no courts, only deportations, and in parallel, border control, tightening at entry points, higher barriers, suspension of humanitarian visas, and again, for the sake of numbers, for reporting. Migration is the main instrument of pressure in elections, in politics, in the media, and now, as Trump runs for office again, it is being used once more, louder, harsher. Against this backdrop, a tank decorated with garlands in Poland is merely scenery, a random scene on city streets where the military decided to add some festivity, but the celebration ends when the camera is turned off, because what matters now is not light, but smoke.